And I realized that once all the boomers leave, which the U.S. Census says by 2030, all of the boomers will be out of the workforce, and the majority will be millennials and Gen Z, they just don't have the length of time on the job to develop those skills organically. We're going to have to do something to accelerate their development of leadership skills.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. As you know, my name is Rick Nuske. I am the host of this wonderful show. I have so much fun presenting it for you. And on today's show, I'm with Nanette Minder. How are you, Nanette?
I'm great. Thank you, Rick.
Yes, we were just talking about the weather, as you do, just shooting the breeze. It's cold here, and I'm not sure how hot it is there, but you're coming into summer where you are?
We've had a heat wave. It's been over 100 degrees Fahrenheit
wow.
for quite a few, well, about a week and a half. Yeah, it's not fun.
Oh, goodness me. So where are you?
South Carolina, so the almost furthest south on the east coast of the U.S.
Okay, well, let's talk about that before we jump into the nuts and bolts of the call in terms of what you like doing when you're not sweltering over there.
Oh, I actually ride a Harley. I'm a Harley girl. I'm a
Very
motorcycle
nice.
rider, yeah.
Now,
And we just had Myrtle Beach Bike Week, which is where I live, Myrtle Beach. We just had Myrtle Beach Bike Week, which is 10 days of riding and drinking and concerts and
yeah,
nonstop.
wow.
It's
Excellent.
quite exhausting.
Now, I love the bikes. I've never owned one. Now, is it an old Harley or is it a new Harley? What do you have?
Mine's a 2012.
2012.
And I'm rather short, so I'm limited in my choices of Harley. So there's only like two I can actually put my feet flat on the ground with. So
the ones with the very low seat. That would be
exactly.
me.
Yes, exactly. Seats and low shocks. Yep.
Yeah, so
That's me.
and you love the cruising lifestyle. Is there? Do you
Love it.
have much time for anything else, or do you spend most of the time when you're not working traveling around the States?
I used to travel quite a bit. I don't do so that much anymore. But we also live right near the beach, hence we live in Myrtle Beach. So those are my two favorite things: motorcycle riding and going to the beach.
It sounds like utopia to me, actually.
It is utopia.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking about moving now.
There you go.
Now,
Welcome. I will show you around.
Now, for everybody who's on the call today, we're going to be talking about leadership development in the workplace. We're going to be talking about generational transitions. And so this is going to be a good call for you. So if you want to listen in, make sure you do to the end of the call because there's going to be some gold in this call. Now, Nanette, I'd love for you to share with us your background in terms of your professional experiences, please.
Sure. So I have been in business for 27 years. I own a company called The Training Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were started in 91. And I started doing stand-up training for about 4 years and then realized that there are a lot of good stand-up facilitators out there and not a lot of people who can design good training. And I realized that because I had to keep redesigning the things that were handed to me to facilitate. So I thought, this is really where I can make an impact, is to design training that's good to begin with. So I have a master's in training and development. I went and got a doctorate in adult learning theory because when you're working in the workplace, as I do, that's my audience.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to know how adults learn. And for the most part, even through higher education, we're still stuck in that pedagogical, thank you, pedagogical thinking, which is, follow my lead, the Socratic method. And that's not how adults learn. It's not how they prefer to learn. It's certainly not how they assimilate and apply on the job. Because when you're teaching in the organization, you really have to get down to not only brass tacks quickly, but they have to actually understand how to transfer it back to the job, which most education is not like that. Most education is informational. So that was my forte for many years, 20-something years. I designed training for organizations basically as a freelancer. So I have no specialty topics. I have no specialty industries. I've worked in pharma. I've worked in manufacturing and finance, hospitality, broadcasting, oil production, you name it. I've worked in that environment because my expertise is how adults learn, and then especially in the workplace so that they can take what they've learned and apply it on the job. And over the years, and towards the latter half of those 25 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
I realized two things that made me kind of embarrassed about the work that I was doing. And one is that although I got great feedback on the classes that I developed, people always said, this is the best class I've ever had and best training. And it's funny because, I'm not an expert in any of those topics. So it's not about me knowing the topic. It's about me knowing how people learn and how to help you to learn. So I always got very good feedback, but I realized that because I'm not an expert, because I work in pharma and finance and hospitality and all sorts of areas, I'm just designing one-off classes. And even if that's the best one-off class you've ever had, that's not really making an impact on the organization. It's making a very, very small impact on, 20 people or something like that, maybe 100 if we're lucky, if it's a ongoing curriculum. But just the best work that I can do is really not making an impact in my industry and in business, which is what I want to do. So there was that realization which niggled at me for a while. And then I also realized all this talk about the 4 generations in the workplace and how millennials and Gen Z will make up 75% of the workplace by 2030. And I've done a lot of leadership, training for the companies that I've worked for. I realized, most leaders get the majority of their leadership skills on the job by being at a company for 20 or 30 years. And so they come up through the ranks. They understand how the company works. They understand the culture. They've seen things that went well. They've seen the things that went poorly. They've got an innate sense of what leadership looks like after 20 or 30 years of being a follower. And I realized that once all the boomers leave, which the U.S. Census says by 2030, all of the boomers will be out of the workforce. And the majority will be millennials and Gen Z. They just don't have the length of time on the job to develop those skills organically. We're going to have to do something to accelerate their development of leadership skills. And so for the last, since 2015, so 4 years, I've just done, not an about face, because I'm still doing custom development for my clients, but it's strictly leadership now, and it's strictly not one class at a time. It's all integrated. It's, in order for you to be a good leader, you're going to have to understand how operations works and how finance works and how human resources works and how marketing works. Like, you cannot be a leader and not understand how the company runs. And so I guess the third revelation I had is that we've been training for 20, 30 years now in silos. So we have somebody come into an organization as, say, a financial analyst, and then all of their training and professional development forevermore is going to be something in finance, right? You'll become a senior financial analyst. You'll become a finance director. And we don't give those people insight into what does operations do, what does HR do, what does finance do. And so I can see how people become leaders in an organization but really aren't business people, and that's how they end up still making bad decisions. Even they go, what, you're a senior vice president, how could you make such a bad decision? Because you didn't have any like operations training the whole time, right? So my new bent is, first of all, we have to do a much more accelerated process to teach leadership skills to younger people in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. And then we also have to do it in a much more integrated way, because we've now, in retrospect, I realize we've completely failed in terms of training in organizations because we're not making business people.
Yeah, they're just, and this is, I'm just looking back on my own history. You're exactly right. I was, when I came through the ranks, I was never involved in, the more financial side of things. I was told to do this particular thing. And then all of a sudden I was in this senior management position, and I had very little understanding of all those other parts. So this is such a critical thing that you're now talking about, this holistic approach.
Exactly. And I also think it's one of the reasons that we struggle with retention and turnover, because I think people think, and it's not just a theory, it's true. If I don't go somewhere else, I'm never going to develop any other skills. So if your own company just figured out that we need to, give you broader experiences or have you work. See, the problem, like we'll use the finance example again, is not only are you only getting training, more and more training in that specific field, but you're also doing it with people who are also in that field, right? Like we don't teach finance topics to everybody. We teach it to finance guys. So we need to have people, cohorts, I call them cohorts. You need to have a representation of the whole company who's taking this class on, let's say, stakeholder management, or even just understanding who your stakeholders are. I mean, there's a big, right? There's a big failure right there. People don't know who the stakeholders are. My boss, yes. Okay. Well, there's a lot more than that.
Well, there's many customers, isn't there?
Exactly. Yeah. And, understanding how the company makes revenue and, what are strategic decisions. I mean, people just don't don't get the big picture. It's not their fault. In training, and I will take responsibility for this. We have completely failed them, and I'm very embarrassed that I only figured this out, 25 something years into my career.
Well, look, you wouldn't be the only one sitting here now with this revelation in front of them, having to process it, because I think that's just the mold of the machine that we've come out of in terms of the learning process.
Right.
I wonder. I'm seeing a lot of. You talked about how we learn as adults. I'm seeing a lot of push for technology. This online training environment. What is the difference between the digital learning environment and the value of one-to-one training in the real workplace, like a mentoring type of role?
Yeah. Well, I wholeheartedly endorse the latter. I think I wrote a book that 2018, just about a year ago, my book came out. And it's one of the things that I discuss is, in addition to what we just talked about, is what we've done to ruin training and ruin people's professional development. Another thing that we've done is in the 90s, we heavily went to e-learning, and e-learning was going to solve everything because it was distributed and you could take it as needed, and you didn't have to wait for a class to be enrolled or to be offered. And it was professional development on your time, just in time. And in theory, that all sounds great, but that's not how adults learn. Adults learn through collaboration and synergy, because I only have so much information in my own head. I get better at thinking when I'm working with other people who open up my possibilities, where I'm introduced to other ideas, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, okay, let me reconsider what I thought to be true. So the problem with online learning and digital learning is it's self-study. We know that most people aren't self-directed. That's another good thing about classrooms, is you must show up for a certain period of time, and there is somebody that you're accountable to, not only your fellow participants, but your facilitator. So, online learning doesn't offer any of that. But the other thing is, until very recently, so I will say that online learning's gotten better, but until very recently, online learning was very linear. It was a lot of, people will call PowerPoint, 90 PowerPoint slides, online learning, just click your way through it and answer the quiz at the end. Well,
death by PowerPoint.
Yeah, but there's no possibility. I mean, that's not how the world works. That's not how business works. Things are changing all the time. So you can't teach things really in a linear way if you want people to be better thinkers. Again, as children, absolutely, I can teach you that this is the right way to do math, this is the right way to spell words. Those things are very linear because you've got to get that foundational knowledge. But at the point where I'm asking you to make strategic decisions and solve problems, and you have to be a bigger picture thinker. You have to be able to hold more than one concept in your head at a time, and we're not teaching people to do that. Definitely not with online learning and digital learning, because my husband's a perfect example. He annoys the heck out of me, but he's got required learning every quarter, and he'll just sit there and click, 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 or if it's a video, he'll start it running, and then he'll go outside for a cigarette, and he'll come back when it's done, and then he'll take the quiz. If he doesn't do well on the quiz, then he'll pay attention. But basically, we've just dumbed everything down so much that unless you have really bad short-term memory or you've got no work experience at all, you ought to be able to finish the quiz. You ought to be able to be successful at the quiz at the end. So, long answer to your question, I do not believe in e-learning. I do not believe in digital learning. It's not the way that people learn. And it's certainly not how they internalize. That's good for memorization. It's good for, education. I'll make you knowledgeable about something, but that's not learning.
When we're talking about these generational gaps and how they're changing and the lack of experience versus, a lifetime worth of learning, do you think that everybody has the ability to become a leader in terms of the different personality types?
That is a great question, and I think it's one of my philosophical foundations. So I don't think that everybody has the ability, because I think that not everybody has the desire. For instance, I, early in my career, was promoted to a leadership position very young, in my early 20s. I had a woman who worked for me who was probably double my age. And one day she said to me, "You're the best manager I've ever had." So I can do it, but I don't enjoy doing it.
I agree.
So to me, that's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just exhausting to do the work and also manage all, other people. That's just, I don't enjoy that. So I think people have the capability, but I don't think everybody has the desire. My premise, in one of the things that I speak about in my curriculum design, in my perfect world curriculum design, is why don't we just give everybody leadership skills, and then those who enjoy it or are good at it will rise to the top. Meanwhile, you've at least increased the skills of everybody else in the organization, right? At least they understand stakeholders. At least they understand decision making. At least they understand teamwork. At least they understand giving quality feedback. You're going to only benefit the organization by teaching people all of those skills. And then those people who really enjoy leadership will rise to the top. It's like taking a great salesperson and saying, you should not be the sales manager because you're the great salesperson. Those are two entirely different skill sets. And I may not enjoy being a manager. I may really like being out there with a customer all the time, or, thinking I'm going to lose the sale. And then at the end I can save it. I mean, that's where my adrenaline comes, not from coaching other people to do the exact same thing. That may not be where my adrenaline comes from. So I think there are a certain personality type who are born, I'll say born leaders, in that they love to do it. And then I think we can give everybody those skills, but I don't think everybody wants to be a leader.
No, that's great feedback. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful insight. I know that your book, Future Proofing Your Organization, is quite significant. How long did it take you to put that together?
Longer than it should have. A little less than a year, because I'd been researching it for about 2.5 years at that point, and I'd already developed my curriculum plan. So I knew what best practice should be in terms of, as we said earlier, putting people together in cohorts and giving them all sorts of different experiences and exposure to different areas of the business. I truly believe that people really should be learning on the job, and so it's a whole different design process for, how do I get you to learn stakeholder management and not put you in a class for it? And make you accomplish real work at the same time, because part of what's wrong with training is everything is contrived. As close as you can make it to being, let's practice negotiating the sale, it's still contrived. I told you what the situation was. You're practicing with somebody who doesn't really have skin in the game. You still have to go out and do it in real life to actually get it. So I feel like let's bring people together into learning cohorts to give them that foundational knowledge, which is definitely necessary in all types of topics, but then send them back out in the job to do real world projects to get them to understand, to have that aha moment, to really understand, like, oh, now I know what a stakeholder can or cannot do for me.
How long would it take for somebody who's in that leadership position, with your help, to identify the up-and-comers, the ones that are going to be leaders in their organization? Is there a process that you can use to identify them quickly?
Well, so that's a good question. No one's ever asked me that, so that's very interesting, because all of my clients are focused on what skills do we have to get them and what's the proper implementation cycle and process, and how do we not leave anybody behind, that kind of thing. One of the things that I believe in strongly is assessments. So having people and helping people to understand what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they enjoy, where they excel, those kinds of things. And that actually came from a course that I took when I was getting my master's degree. I took a whole semester's course, and all we did was assessments. Every week we took an assessment. The next week we got our results, and we processed them. And I honestly think that's, it's definitely why I'm good at the work that I do, because I maximize what I'm good at, and I know what I enjoy, those kinds of things. So I don't think a person necessarily, like a leader necessarily, would identify those people, but if we put them through the correct battery of assessments, and that sounds more like, put you into prison, that sounds like a psychological thing, and I don't mean it that way. But like, for instance, there's an assessment out there called the Gregork. And what I learned from that 20, 30 years ago was that I'm very concrete sequential. So even if a fire is burning next to me, I will finish the task I'm doing right now, because that's the way my brain works. Like, I'm a person that works from outlines. I'm a person that, works from notes. Like I said, I researched my book for 2.5 years before I wrote it. Like that's the way I work. Things go in an order. And even if there's a legitimate reason for it to be out of order, I won't do it. That's not the way my brain works. So I think, well, it's called concrete sequential is what it's called, and that's what I am. And so at least I'm aware of that. So I know that I'm doing it. I still can't overcome it, and that's 30 years of knowing that I'm doing it. But at least I'm like, okay, well, I know why I'm stressing out. It's because I'm so fixated on this thing when I don't have to be, but for whatever reason I can't let it go. I'm only 2 hours away from finishing this project. I just want to finish it before I return that phone call, or whatever it is. So I think when we give people those kinds of assessments where they realize Do they like to work with people? Do they like to work alone? Do they learn things quickly? Are they more hands-on? Are they, a personable person? If they find out what their style is, if an individual in our training process finds out what their style is, then I think it's a revelation that they are leadership. I don't think anybody in the organization will go, see, well, that's a very good question, Rick. So I'll finish this. I don't think anybody in the organization goes, oh, look at Rick. He's really coming up. I bet, another 2 years, he's going to be our star. But the flip side of that, the other side of my soapbox is that's what we do in organizations right now. For some reason, especially in the U.S., I'm not sure if this is everywhere.
Mm.
A lot of times we go to colleges, university, and we recruit people and say, you're going to be in our high our high potential group, and we're going to put all the resources into you because we think you've got what it takes, in 7 or 10 years to be, moving up the management track. Well, that's ludicrous to me. Like, why would you pre-pick somebody and stick them in a track? Again, why not train everybody in all those skills which are necessary no matter what role you're in, and then people who are drawn to leadership will naturally come to the surface. Then you'll find out who your true leaders are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm noticing here on your bio your work with the Huffington Post and T&D Journal. What's coming up for you now? Are you still involved with those types of things?
Well, I've wrote for both of those outlets. I do speak a lot at conferences. What I have done in the past, because I was an expert in instructional design and adult learning theory, and believe it or not, a lot of people who work in training and development are not. A lot of people who come into training came there because they were good at what they did. And so somebody made them a trainer, just like making that sales manager the manager because they're a good salesperson. A lot of people come to training because they were good at what they did. So a lot of people don't have that in the industry, don't have that foundational knowledge. So for many years, I spoke to all of my training industry and my HR industry colleagues about what I was expert at. But now I'm shifting who am I speaking to more towards the operations folks, the folks who really need to identify the leaders and not the isolated and misguided, in my opinion, training departments. Because there's so many more smaller organizations. The training departments really exist in the elite organizations to begin with. I mean, if you have a leadership development curriculum or program in your organization, you're in an elite organization, and that's not 99% of businesses. 99% of businesses are especially like, again, when we go back to the generations, there's a lot of small businesses that are run by a person who founded that business, who it's now, 65, 70 and would like to retire, but they can't because they didn't bring anybody up through leadership. They were always the decision maker, and now it's like, I have nobody to take over this company.
And that's one of those key points, isn't it? Now, when people want to work with you, Nanette, where are they going to find you?
Trainingdr.com is the website, and there's a link there to make a 1-hour kind of exploratory appointment phone conversation with me.
And what's the process that you take? Is it pretty much exactly what we've been talking about, presumably?
Thanks for opening that door, actually, because you said what's next on my plate. So I am switching the audiences to whom I speak, but I also just started in the U.S. a National Leadership Development Day. Oh. It will be July 31st because there's nothing dedicated to just training leaders. So it's basically going to be a day of service from people like myself, trainers and consultants who do leadership training to, give back to the community, run a workshop, run a webinar, give it away for free, and just get leadership development out there. And then as part of that, or at least my 1-hour webinar is kind of a precursor to a workshop that I'm starting now, because what I've been doing is going into organizations, and it is hard to turn that big ship around. They're so entrenched in what they do. Big organizations also have, things planned for next year already. So it's kind of hard to say, okay, well, in 2021, we're going to start doing this different thing. So it's easier to work with a company who says, take me by the hand and guide me. So what I have managed to figure out how to do in the last year or so is take it from that corporate level, which was my comfort level, because that's where I worked for 20-something years, and bring it down to a smaller organization, say, less than 1,000 employees. And so I've developed a workshop, which is 4 sessions online, and that will roll out in August. And then we'll actually duplicate the same thing in November, but it will be in person. So it's kind of do it yourself in August. Not really, because we have 4 online sessions, but you have a lot of independent work. There'll be 3 to 4 hours of research and working with your colleagues at your own site.
Yeah.
Or if that's not your style, then in November we'll repeat the same 4 online sessions, but in person, and you'll also do all that independent work. You'll actually do it in the live session. So there'll be like 3 or 4 hours of hands-on work in addition to the thinking this process through. So there's 4 steps in the process. One is, first of all, who gets leadership development, and there's no right answer to that. I have an opinion on everything, basically. Right now, so get this, you'll be amazed at this, Rick. Right now, the average person enrolled in a leadership development course is 46 years old, and they're already in a leadership role.
Oh, wow.
So what we do now is we promote people to leadership and then say, gosh, we need to teach you how to give good feedback and how to give critical, constructive feedback, and how to fill out these forms and how to be a coach, and how to, now that you're a leader, now we're going to teach you all those skills. So that's what's happening mostly now, is we're at that age level. So, I mean, that might be the way we stay. We might say everybody in the organization gets the training, no matter who they are or where they are in the organization. That'll make wonderfully stimulating cohorts, in my opinion. We might say just everybody who walks in the door today, from this point forward, we're going to have a 3-year developmental curriculum where they'll understand the whole business, they'll understand how we make money and our mission, and all of that kind of stuff. So the first session is just, what do we need for the future, and who will those people be, so we know who to train. Then the second one is, so what skills do they need? And we do that by examining job descriptions. What skills do the senior leaders already have, and then comparing it to whom we have coming up in the pipeline, and do we need to start getting them trained up in those skills? And then the third one is, where do we get that training from? Because I'm a huge believer in not reinventing the wheel, and there is so much free training out there now, Rick. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, there is,
but
isn't
there is, but you can't do it willy-nilly. There's got to be some kind of process or
structure,
organization to it. Right, exactly. Some structure, organization, so people are working towards an end. They're not just doing things randomly. So so our second session is, what classes do we need, what skills do we need to develop, and then the third is, where do we get that from? And you can get that from professional associations, LinkedIn Learning, MOOCs, edX is my favorite, Coursera, all online learning, so much cheaper, and also still on demand. But if you did it in a cohort fashion, where you say, okay, well, you all are going to take this class, but then we are going to process it in person, so it's not just the digital learning. And then the fourth is, so how do we roll this out? Do we do online? Do we do classroom? Do we, in the end, I mean, it's funny, because 20-something years, all I did was build training, but to me, that's the last step. There's so much training out there, and there's so many good resources out there, that until the very last step, I don't believe you have to build it yourself. But if you do, then I have that skill,
skill to help you out.
Well, yeah. But generally, the only time you have to build something yourself is if it's proprietary or it's technical.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been just absolutely a complete treat to spend some time with you, Nanette. Now, for everybody who's listening to the show today, as is normally the case, I will be creating some links back to, in this case, trainingdr.com. Nanette, thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business show today.
I really appreciate it, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.